I mean, definitely still better than before we first started.
Yeah. So that's where I always tell people collars like e-collar, prong collar, like a cop on a collar, right? Because he understands there's the consequence. In the home, have you tried? Does the bonker have any effect on him?
So we've gotten a lot more familiar with that.
Okay.
I would say it's like, for me at least, I feel like it's 50-50. Sometimes, like, I guess it depends on like what he's doing that is like what we don't want. So if he is, like if he's barking and we throw it at him, he will like go find somewhere else and like usually will calm down. But if he's like, I don't know, that's usually when I use it the most. But like if he's trying to, like if he's barking at the door, like if someone's walking by and we throw it, he'll like kind of regroup and just come back to the door.
Oh, sure, yes.
Yeah.
And then he's back at it. Yeah, so.
Right, it's almost like I need to have like a bunch to
Yes, and I usually tell people make a couple, like 2 or 3 or so. Because in some cases when we correct the dog, they think it's a toy, right? And then they start playing like it's a toy.
Yes.
So in that case, I keep correcting. So he gets one, I have others, right? To keep correcting until he realizes this is not a toy, right? This is actually a deterrent. So my kind of smash.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna.
Before we were like, if something like that were happening, we would put him in place, which I thought was very helpful. But I've been having a hard time. Right, like I know you told us like if you can't kind of like follow through with the consequence, then there's no point in like throwing the word out there.
Correct.
And so I've been trying not to do that, but it's also hard because like I would like him to go to place, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that might just be something that we have to wait on, which is not a big deal. But yeah.
Okay. So you don't have to wait.
Okay.
There are options. Okay. It's just certain options take more skill. And I actually just showed you one right now. Okay. So you guys remember Cesar Milan?
Yes. A little bit.
Yeah. So I did the Caesar test just now, right? I did, I think, about 3, okay? And I used no collar, okay? So here, the reason why I do remote, because it's the easiest for most people, you just press a button, raise a number. Prong collar, good for that physical leverage, right? Bonker, good for inside the home, because if you're bonking your dog in public, it looks bad, okay? So I'm very familiar with just like the realities of life in the world the way it is, right? So here, yes, you're correct. Let's make multiple bonkers, okay? If you throw one and it's a game, then I grab another and correct them with it. So the video with Gary Wilkes, which is the 3rd video, I believe, in that series that I sent you, there's the puppy on his lap.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you saw the intensity with which he corrected that puppy.
Yes.
Okay. Would you say you've corrected Milo with that intensity?
No.
Correct. Okay. Because people feel bad.
Yes.
Because of physicality, which I completely understand. Now, I myself, to be honest with you, don't like the bonker. Okay, because of that feeling it gives people. I am old school Cesar Milan physical touch. That's my preference. So I still do physical touch. I just don't do bonker. But bonker is easier for people because it's also a projectile, right? For me, I don't need projectile. I can do energy and presence, but I've been doing this for 10 years.
Right.
Okay. So here, we have bonker. The biggest thing, when you say I correct, he goes and regroups. Is because the consequence was not firm enough or not direct. So if you're throwing it near, because I think Jeff Gellman does near, right? If near was working, you would have done it and he would not return to it. Then I would say you're fine because it actually worked. But if he leaves and regroups, it means it didn't work, right? So did me correcting with my hand right now work?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah.
I mean, it's calm.
And what else?
He understands the consequence.
What else?
Oh, when he did like a regroup like he would at home, he was corrected again, right?
And then what else?
Those are all my ideas.
You stay in play. I'm reinforcing what you told him to do, right? Was just go here and chill. So I got him to chill, and then the last thing you said is correct. Those were all correct. But the last thing that we were missing was you wanted him to not get off of here. That's what you were trying to correct, okay? And And I understand why you did it, but you took a softer approach because of this.
Yes.
Yeah, I get it, okay? So, he doesn't care.
Right. No, he absolutely does not.
No, and I completely get it. This is the terror that people have, right? Where it's just like, so I had a dog who bit the husband, and bit the wife, and bit the mother-in-law, okay? And he tore his Achilles, and they didn't do e-collar during that time. Boy, did he regress, okay? Because they felt bad because he was injured, and I said, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And now you can see, like, I understand why you did it as a human because you're compassionate, but he doesn't care. And his behavior got worse, he got more aggressive. Now, of course, we tamed it back down again, post the Achilles thing, and guess what happened? Tore the other one.
Oh, no.
Okay, but that time they knew better. And they said, we're not going to ease up on the discipline, right? Now, they eased up on the exercise, but they did not ease up on the discipline, okay? So does that kind of make sense to you there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I understand avoiding the area. I agree with that. But here where you have your collar placed, not in that same area, it looks like, but also just so you have visual, other methods that we have. Okay. Now the reason why I don't always go to Cesar Millan, it's super effective. It's my favorite. Is people, it's a skill set. You know, it took me maybe a year, 2 years of doing like a lot of physical touch with dogs in the Cesar Millan methodology to learn how to do it naturally. And where now, like I can just, boom, here we go, right? And I'm also very sensitive to dogs. Like the moment he started pining just now, boom. Whereas most people tend to ignore it because it's way better than what it used to be, right? And they let it pass, but then that little whine becomes that bigger one that we really don't want. So also just that consistency of like any little thing I'm going to disagree with, especially because I'm familiar with Milo and where he's willing to go. Okay, so one, if you're going to revisit the bonker, make multiple, but then also, you know, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. Okay, because that's why we struggle, and I completely understand because of just that psychological barrier of like I feel like I'm hitting my dog, right? Now I'm sure for my mom, growing up, for me, spanking me was not the easiest, right? That physicality towards your own child. But it was necessary in raising me. Now, I'm the oldest of 4, okay? So they were very strict with me. And they didn't spank my brothers and sisters as much as they spanked me. And there is a clear, you can see a difference in our behavior, in how serious we take things, in our discipline, stuff like that. And I credit it to that. And I've seen it elsewhere in my family too, where like the oldest who was the most strict, and you can see personality-wise how they kind of grew up, and then the following kids not as strict, and then they're not as disciplined, right? So kind of seeing that firsthand, just like growing up and stuff, and then dealing with dogs, like that's why I just kind of have that indifference. Now, admittedly, I prefer the Cesar Millan touch because it's just me and the dog. So I get the whole bumper thing. So if you want to try Cesar touch, that is also another option. The way we do it is I simply take the hand like this, right? And if you go against if you take your dominant hand against your other hand, and you should go against it, you can hear it. Now, like here, so you do what most people do. You're doing this, right? And you're seeing this, but I'm going exactly.
Okay, so it's no forearm, it's just in the wrist.
It's in the wrist,
Okay.
right? So you don't need to rear back to make a lot of firm contact. You just need a good flick of the wrist, right? An example I like to give is, I don't know if you've seen the Bruce Lee 1-inch punch. Have you seen it? He doesn't rear back and boom. He's just bah, right? And he concentrates all that energy and he sends the guy back like a few feet, right? It's kind of the same thing with this. You don't need to rear back to create power. You just need a good kind of flick, and you can hear it, right? Ow. So I've learned that intensity. So it sounds weird, but if that's something you want to try, what I always tell my clients is you take your hand and you practice this, and you give yourself a number. 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, right? And you kind of gauge it. And I even have couples work with each other, and they'll give each other a number, and they'll create the intensity, and they'll go, what do you think that was? I think that was a 5, that was a 2. Because also the way what you think you're delivering isn't what you're delivering, And it's all perfectly normal. It's just part of the process. But it gives you another option, right? So here, with Milo, all I did was just a few touches, and he's just been sitting here chill. Okay, so does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, you've come a long way.
Yeah.
You've come a long way. I think it's just that residual stuff, and of course, like in the home, ideally, I don't want my clients dependent on the collar, which is why I give them the option of the bonker, because in the home, it's more so don't do that.
Yeah.
So with applying place, when or where would you apply place within the home?
So before we were trying to do it like when we were eating, so like if we're eating dinner, not that, I mean, he's not really like a beggar, he doesn't like trying to get in your face, but he was just like, would be like right next to me, and like sometimes I don't want that, so most of the time if we were eating, we would put him in place for the duration of the meal.
Okay, and that's fine. Where else would you use it?
We're just watching TV and we just want to work on some kind of duration exercise.
Okay, cool. So your intention is duration work?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, that's correct. Are you ever using it as a means of deterring them from doing something, like barking at the door or barking at the window?
Not usually like retroactively, like not usually if he's barking then I put him in place.
Uh-huh.
But like if we know people are going to maybe be going up and down the stairs like this, like sometimes we'll put him in place beforehand.
Okay, which is technically approach, right? An approach. So you have a number of options here. So if we want Milo to learn not to bark, how would we actually address that?
Probably with consequences, right?
Correct.
Instead of avoidance.
Correct, right? Because and there's no right or wrong answer here. In some instances, one answer is going to be more effective than the other, right? So that's why I give options. But if my goal is to deter the behavior, I simply provide consequence as the dog is doing it, right? Because if you do place, you are redirecting the brain. But then what happens if he's barking on place?
And he's thinking that place is a consequence.
I'm sorry?
Does he think, at that point, does he think that place is a consequence?
Mm-mm.
No.
Right, so what happens is you put him on place,
Mm-hmm.
he's there, he's chill. Someone walks upstairs, he starts barking. How would you correct that?
So then if we like threw a bonker at him,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking he would probably get up and get off
That
the
is
place.
correct. So then you would keep correcting when they want the remote or whatever
Right.
to send him back. Okay,
Right.
because that's completely normal. So like right now, if he barked and I corrected him with the remote, I would anticipate he's going to flush off because
Yeah.
he's thinking it's the object.
Yeah.
I keep the pressure on until he goes back on, and then he has to decipher, okay, I got remoted when I was on place, but then when I got off the place, I got remoted some more. When I got on place, it disappeared. Why did that happen?
Mhm.
And usually by the third time, the dog will start to tie, oh, it's because when I'm on place, I'm not supposed to bark, or I'm not supposed to whine, or I'm not supposed to like get alert, right? Then you'll see that you'll correct him, and he'll end up resting his head and going into a calmer state. Okay, so it's still the same concept. It's if he barks when he's on place or not, it still don't do that.
Mhm.
Okay, except if he's on place, it's more complicated because if you correct him for the barking and he breaks the position, well, now we have to reinforce the command,
Yeah.
right? So if he were to be on his own time and bark or something, it would simply be an aversive because it's just don't do that.
Mhm.
Now you can do one, you can do the other, you can do both, doesn't matter. But just so you understand the differences that each one does. So like let's say jumping on people. If someone comes over, I could put Milo in place. That prevents Milo from jumping on them. But he's not learning not to jump because he's not being allowed to do so.
Mhm.
So in order to learn that, let's say I don't have him on place, the person comes in, he jumps, I would bonk, remote, correct on the prong, or Caesar touch as he's jumping or thinking of jumping to tell him or teach him, you don't do that, okay? Because if I put him on place, the person comes over, he doesn't jump on him because he can't, it's a preventative measure, but then after 20 minutes I go, okay, Milo, break, what do you think might happen?
He said jump.
Yeah, because nothing said don't jump on him.
Yeah.
So then we'd still kick in with correction for jumping on the person, right? So it's really picking and choosing. Maybe the person coming in is someone he cannot jump on. It's an older person, he can knock him down, he can hurt them. We definitely want to use this and not gamble, giving him the opportunity and correcting for it, right?
Mhm.
That makes sense. So that's where this is more effective. But if I have someone, they're like, yeah, sure, I'll help you train your dog, and I'll stand still and ignore him, you can correct him, fine. Then I can do that approach and use it to my advantage. But ultimately, it's kind of two things at once, or at some point working together, because maybe when that person that comes over who's sensitive to a big dog jumping on them would like to have Milo come say hi, but we've already done the work of you don't jump on people.
Mhm.
So then when we release him, he still wouldn't jump on the person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's super common, but definitely if you're trying to correct something, and he's regrouping, it's because, you know, it wasn't firm enough. And it's gonna suck, probably feel bad. But then when you see the change, I think that's when people go like, oh, okay, like, you're making it more stressful for yourself, more frustrating for yourself, because you're doing it for his benefit, but in return it's not benefiting you.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yes.
I mean, at this point, we don't feel bad about disciplining
Well, I
him.
do feel bad about the neck.
The neck is the only.
One of us doesn't
is the only-
feel bad.
Yeah.
But once that thing gets healed, like he's gonna be, you know, back on, you know, e-collar most of the time.
Sure.
So we take breaks now, but.
I would actually take advantage of the fact you don't have to e-collar and learn these other approaches,
Okay.
right? Yeah, I mean, because I am an efficient trainer because I know so many tools, but I always educate people on what I know works the most effectively, right? So Caesar touch, if it was super effective, which it is when you're skillful and you've done it for 10 years, otherwise I would teach her after that. Bonker is easier, right? Even though I know people are more deterred by it because how it looks and how it feels, it's easier for them to correct to what the dog needs, as opposed to using their hand, you know? Of course, e-collar and prong, those are just simple because of the tools themselves. But yeah, I would take advantage of this and then just challenge yourself and either pick your tool of choice, whether it's gonna be the bonker or the physical touch, and develop that skill, okay? And the more you correct, right, whether it be firm and all that stuff and you don't like it, the less you correct in the future. Because, so he's never gonna be perfect, no one's perfect, not a human's perfect, right? My dogs, I still correct to this day, but I correct them once in a blue moon. Like I'll still do physical touch on my pit or my chihuahua. It's just very, very rare. Because in the very beginning, it was a lot of correcting. And they're like, man, Jesse's super consistent. He's like a firm corrector. Like we don't wanna, you know, step out of bounds. But they're dogs, so they make mistakes. But I'm consistent, you know? So because of that, it's infrequent. So in the beginning, it might suck because you have to correct more and correct more firmly. But then it's gonna start deterring behaviors because it's like, hey, these corrections suck. I don't wanna do that. And then ultimately, that leads to you correcting less. Okay?
Yes.
Other questions?
So if we get to the point where we're correcting less and less, do we have to be, like, for the littlest thing that might need a correction to jump on that so that way he doesn't get the mindset of like, oh, I can get away with this, maybe I can get away with this next, and it just slowly escalates?
It really depends on the personality type. So what would happen is you would correct, and then once you get to a point where you're like, hey, we feel pretty good, like this is good. We're not dependent on the collar inside the home. Outside is different, a lot of stimuli, right? But once you get there, right, now you've not only developed like kind of that respect factor, but more so the confidence of like, hey, we can really do this, right? Is if one day he does give like a little infraction, and you're like, I'm gonna ignore this, right? And then just give him like a no or whatever you want to use as your word of like, don't do that. But then we start to see him regress. Then I would say he's the dog that you just have to be consistent, right?
I feel like that already. I mean, obviously we haven't gotten to that point,
with you,
but like as soon as he knew that the e-collar wasn't on, like the first couple days after it happened, we walked him just in the martingale, and it was like, I feel like he was like, oh, like I can pull again, like you're pretty much like you're not in control, like I'm pulling you where I want to go now. So yeah, I feel like I don't know if he is a dog that would be okay with like not correcting for the smallest thing. I mean, I guess we'll find out.
I mean, I'm leaning on what you're saying too, because of what I've seen of Milo and stuff. But only time will tell, right? And yes, you're correct, right? Dogs aren't dumb, just like we humans. When there's costs, we alter our behavior. You know, same thing for dogs. Now, do I need these tools? No. Like I could take Milo, put him on a slip leash, and do Caesar stuff, and I can get Milo pretty far. But again, I've been doing this for 10 years, because all people are always like, well, how come you depend on the collar? I'm like, I don't depend on it. I have my clients that need to depend on it because they're not me, So I think now's a good time to actually just practice Sans e-collar, Sans prong in the home type stuff. Getting familiar with the bonker, doing more correcting him. If you want to do Caesar touch as well. And then what I would suggest is if you kind of pick one, really lean on that one, as opposed to going between things, right? Because you have to develop the skill. When I first started this, I did not get results like you just saw right now with Caesar touch. Like it took failure after failure after failure to really learn how to manipulate my touch and my energy and my presence and all that stuff so that I can create stuff like this. Okay? But what does this show you though?
It works.
Yeah, and there's hope.
Yeah.
It works. Yeah, you know, there's hope and you can do it. It just takes time. You know, you guys have seen me 10 years into my career. You're not seeing me 10 years ago. If I had this, if you would have brought this dog to me 10 years ago, you would have gotten a lot of free training because I would have been learning so much. And that's what I did in the beginning because if I didn't get the results, I didn't charge for the lesson. And I was like, I will be back next week. And when I make that change, then you can pay me because my payment was the knowledge of what was working and what wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so all this, no worries. Other questions?
I have one smaller question. So before, when we were doing place for longer periods of time, sometimes he would fall asleep in place. And I just wanted to check in on that because like I know, like we talked about, like if we take him to like Home Depot and he's in a heel the whole time, then if he lays down, we've both been like, oh, he's so relaxed, like this is so nice, and you're like, no, like heel, he needs to be up by you or sitting or whatever, depending on how much we're moving. And I wasn't sure if place was the same way.
Sure, so he can fall asleep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Because heel is, so places go here and I don't care what you do, just don't step off. Right? So like technically you could even bark on place.
Okay.
But really, most of the time people don't want the dog barking, right? So that's why we correct that. But technically, according to how the command is taught, he could do that. When it comes to heel, walk with me, stay with me, sit when I stop, now lay down when I stop. So that's why that one's more strict, right? Now, I always do tell people behavior supersedes obedience, okay? So if I have a reactive dog and we're walking past another dog and we've corrected this dog for reactivity, in the beginning what we might see is the dog will actually curve over to the person's right side when passing by that dog. And then they'll come back to the left in avoidance, okay? Now, that's out of heel command, right? Because heel is on the left. But I'll tell the owner, let it be. Because we're prioritizing behavior, right? And the dog is saying, hey, instead of being reactive, I'm going to come to this side. And I go, fine, we want to give that dog that decision. Now, as we progress with the training, we would tighten up and not allow that. But in the beginning, it's more important than the obedience that we allow it, right? So technically, let's say for Home Depot, like I would correct that, right? But if you're like, man, Jesse, like before he used to be the craziest at Home Depot, and now he like lays down and chills and like falls asleep, you can decide and say like, you know what, we're gonna actually accept this because this is the calmest he's ever been here and we want him to relate calmness with Home Depot. I would say, hey, that makes sense, right? And I wouldn't have a problem with that. But then at a certain point, once we establish that, we would start being strict again. Does that make sense? So like there's a little bit of gray area because he's prioritizing or he's choosing a better behavior. But then once we establish that, then I kind of go back and I tighten it up. Okay? Other questions? Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to release this guy. Right? And we're going to teach the down command formally using pressure. Okay? Where is it at? On the left side?
Right.
On his right. So the other side.
Oh, this way. Gotcha. Right. Just so I
And
know.
then the vet shaved it down, so it's a little bit easier to see.
Okay.
He has not been a fan of us looking at it
Yeah.
at all, so.
So we're going to here. So I'm going to start with this first. Just make it easier on to go down. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little bit of pressure here on the back of his neck on 16. So the reason why I'm doing it, just making it easier for you guys, and then I'll pass them off to you.
Okay.
So what we're doing here is, I went down to 16, and I'm putting very subtle pressure on the back of his neck and on his shoulders, going down as I'm tapping. Good. The moment I feel him go into the pressure, I ease up on everything. Okay, break. 3 more. 20. The reason why we went so low, because anytime we teach something new, we always do go down low. But earlier, when I had just started, could you see how much he was moving?
Yeah.
Right? So using pressure to put a dog in a down position, it's conflicting because e-collar wants to make him move. Right? So if I would have kept it higher, he would have been all over the place. So even at 16, he was still a little bit all over the place, but it was enough to get him to move and think, but not enough for him to panic, so that he could think through going into that down position. Okay? Break. And that one I think was just 2 taps. And he did it right away. Alright, so this one went correct.
So we haven't given the command yet, so we're...
Yeah, just laying in the pressure. This is 25.
It's been lower, so we have to keep jumping a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. 43. Good. Do you know why that was confusing for him?
Because he was like, I've already done this. I know what you're going to ask me to do.
Yeah, you want to go down. So now I'm going opposite to him, which causes conflict. It's normal. So what I kept doing was slight pressure on the leash, but I raised pressure on the remote. I ended up at 55, then he popped up, back down to 20. Okay?
I know, he looks so happy to be corrected.
So now we're getting the opposite confusion.
Right. Because he said I just got in trouble for doing this.
Yes, that is correct. Good. And that's where the physical pressure and the leash pressure come into play. Because he has to start deciphering, oh, one is going up and one is going down. So if it's going up, I sit. It's going down, I lay down. Okay? Break. 36 for that last one. Good, wait a moment, right? Yep. 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 41. Better. Easier that time. Back down. 23. 10. 10. 10. 10. 10. 10. 10. 10. Good. 30 on that one. Break. One more. Good. So now I'm waiting to see if he downs prematurely, right? So the last one I had to correct. Now he opted not to, so that was good. And technically, he could have downed because he's not under any heel, he's not under any command. But because I'm teaching the down, I had to correct it so then I could have him do it again. Okay, so this time he opted not to do it. I'm going to dip down, we're at 23 again. A little bit of pressure and 10. Okay.
I've noticed after we correct him, he'll have this huge smile on his face. Is that pretty common?
It's stress.
Stress, okay.
Yeah. He's venting stress. He's venting the correction, letting it out like, okay, that sucked.
So it's not necessarily like...
The smile. Like this right here is all stress. Yeah, it looks like happy, you know?
Right.
So, but you have to read the context. So because this is a stressor, safe to assume he's responding to pressure. And dogs really don't have happy, they have excitement, right? But people, because it looks like a smile, read it as happy. So there's a video that was on the internet that I've been trying to find again, where the dog was like at the vet clinic or being groomed or something, and everybody kept saying like, oh, the dog is smiling, and then the video was saying the dog was smiling. The dog was really, really anxious, super anxious in the video. And very few people in the comments were like, that is an anxious dog. You know, they were mostly dog trainers. But everybody was like, oh my God, he's so happy, this and that, being groomed, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that dog is so under stress right now. So, you know, it's the way we see it and perceive it. So always when you see something, look at the whole context, and that will most likely tell you how the dog is actually feeling within that moment. Because that open mouth has either a lot of running around, trying to get in that oxygen, right? 2, being put under stress. venting that stress. 3, anxiety is typically when we see that open mouth look. Okay? So questions about this so far?
No. How much of pressure are you applying on?
Very, very little. Yeah, very little. You know, just enough that he feels the downward pressure. One of the things that people do is they put too much physical. So we have 3 points of pressure technically. We have what's going on in the back of the neck, we have the remote, and we have the hand. So because there's 3 points of pressure, if I kick in with a lot of pressure here and here and here, dogs panic. They flail, they get frantic. So that's why we go low. And it was super subtle on the leash, super subtle on the shoulders, super subtle on the remote. And all those 3 things add up to a larger amount of pressure. And then I was gently increasing it here and here. My hands while shortening the leash until he finally gave me that downwards motion, and then everything disappears. Okay? Who wants to try first? We're at 23.
Are we going to add to the down command?
Correct. By then, the class will be saying the word will sit and down. Okay. Good. And then, yeah, and then we'll pause for a second. Right, just to see if he tries to lay down. And then you're going to place that left foot on the leash there, and then hand, and then tap. Tap. Good. Wait a moment. Now here, instead of moving, I'm going to have you lightly pull up in your leash. And tap. And relax. Good. And we're going to repeat. And wait just a second. Go ahead and let that slack go.
Oh, we're not gonna.
Right, we're gonna do a couple in a row, then we're gonna have you rotate.
Gotcha.
Okay, now left foot on the leash. Little hand, tip. Right there. Perfect. And then we let go. Then you need to break.
Break.
And you're gonna circle around and come back and try again. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second. So like right there, what did you see?
I felt like he was gonna go down.
Yes, right, because he went like this at the end.
Yes.
But he didn't.
Yes.
Okay, so that's what coming to that stop
Uh-huh.
and then being relaxed, because I think the
Yes.
yeah,
Yes,
right?
I was like, don't do it.
Yes. So what I would do is allow him to do it so that we can correct it, because we're teaching him don't assume. Okay, so he technically has to do it, be corrected to learn, oh, I don't do that, right? So now go ahead and yep, slack your leash, and then a little bit of pressure. Right, perfect. Then you can use the leash for the sitting position. Tap. Tap. And a little bit less pressure on the neck. There you go. Tap. Tap. More pressure on the collar. The collar.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry, no, it should be clear. Then relax. Good, right? So here, the leash and the hand pressure, super subtle. Okay, so right there I can feel like that we're seeing, it look like you're lifting him more, right? So as soon as you start to feel that like you're doing more physical, it's feeling like a workout, we're definitely probably doing too much pressure, okay, physically. So then they just up it on the collar, because ultimately we're trying to condition him to respond to the remote. So did Milo know sitting down with food prior to this?
Milo knew sit without food when we picked him up from the rescue.
Okay.
But down was the second, like the first thing that I taught him at home before we started like training anywhere.
Okay, so he had familiarity with it, right? So that's part of why he was able to pick it up easier, because he was familiar with going into that mechanic. Okay. Now, when I get dogs that were already trained with treats and stuff, people usually ask like, well, the dog already knows down sit. And I go, yes, but not with remote.
Right.
Right, because when I did remote at the beginning, what happened?
He moved around.
He kept getting up and standing up and moving, right? Because he's like, what do I do with this? Because people typically think, well, if the dog goes down, and if they get up and don't do it, or if they or whatever, I can just tap the collar, they should do it. I go, no. You have to layer it in. Then the dog learns, oh, when I feel this, it also means to do this, or do this, or do this, right? Because it's a number of options that he has to respond in order to turn off that pressure. So that's why we did it this way with no words. Because if I would have said down and Milo down, how do I put remote on that?
Right.
Right? So we always remove the words, use pressure,
Right.
and then we're going to reintroduce the words. Does that make sense? And we kind of sync those things together. Because before, sitting down meant sitting down and get a treat. Right? So then he's like, okay, give me my treat. Great, I'm done.
Yes.
Walk away, right? And we want, hey, lay down and don't move for 30 minutes. So down in place are meant to be stationary, extended use commands. Go here, don't move for 30 minutes. Lay down on my feet, don't move for an hour. Sit is momentary. 3 to 5 minutes, super short. Gonna have a talk with the neighbor. He can sit for a little bit. But if I know it's gonna be a longer talk, maybe a 15-minute talk, down. And then I can step on the leash so I can keep track of him while I have that conversation, right? Because what can happen is, since we're relaxed and he's behaving, we get so in tune to this conversation, next thing you know, you're like, whoa, how'd you get over there?
Yeah.
Right? So if I step on that leash and he's only got like a few, inches or whatever, if he gets up and moves, I'm gonna catch it right away because I'm gonna feel it on my foot. So I can correct him and reposition him. Okay? Let's go and try the hand pressure with the leash for the down. Now you're going to keep track. There we go. Yes, now I'm showing. Good, now relax. Perfect. And when did you change it to?
33.
That's fine. Break. I'm going to try, I'm going to circle around and do one more, and then we're going to swap handlers. Perfect. That's fine. Because technically that's part of the cue. Okay? And then I'm going to have you just remove his paw. There we go. Good. Now let's say he would have stood up. What would we do?
Go right back into some form of it, right? So
Yeah,
if I couldn't put the pressure on the leash yet, I probably would have tapped first.
Correct.
And maybe put my
Hand
hand on his
pressure.
shoulders.
And then if you could put that foot on the leash, right? Because, so if he's in it down, like when the dogs get the leash under them, and I go to remove it, in the beginning they'll get up, but they should hold the position. So then I correct it, I'm teaching them, hey, when I'm pushing it down, even if I'm like fiddling around here, you still have to hold that position. Okay, so I can use it as a form of distraction as well. Let's go ahead and pop him to sit. There you go, and relax. Perfect. We're going to keep him there. Let's go and swap handlers.
You did 33?
Yeah. And I'm going to have you keep him where he's at, and I'm going to have you put slack on that leash, and we're going to go into the down.
So just like this? And
Right there. Oh, that's right. Yeah, good. And relax. Wait a moment. So he's reading all of this movement, right? When you're kind of reaching for the shoulders and stuff. So technically, he's responding to a cue, okay? Go ahead and lightly pull up, pop him into a sit. Good, and then relax. Perfect, okay? So I think he's got a good concept now. So what I'm going to have you do is you're going to keep the word down first, and then you're going to tap, okay? If we don't see him respond to that second tap, you're going to keep tapping, and then you're going to step on the leash, but we're going to avoid putting hand on the back. Okay? Go ahead.
down and tap.
Tap. There you go. Good. Okay. Now you're going to say sit, tap, and pull up if needed.
Okay. Sit.
Tap. There you go. Now relax. Good. Good, wait a moment. Right, good. Okay, now down.
Down.
Tap. Tap. And then step on, up, almost tap. Step on leash. There you go. Good. Now a lot of this whining here is because we're making him think through it. Okay? And you can correct it. So here, when you set the down backs, so those down, sit, back to down, and he got up, right? What does that tell you?
He's frustrated. He's like, this is not the correct order in which I've been doing it.
Yeah, you're close, he's frustrated, and he was trying to process, right? Because he's trying to go, what are we doing here? So then he gets up, you get the pressure on, but then I think he actually put his butt back down, which is good. So that's him thinking, right? So you keep that tapping going, and you're right when you're about to step on the leash, he figured it out. Okay, so what we just did prior to this with layering and pressure was to give him concept. Okay, now we're trying to teach him how to clarify between what sit is and what down is. Okay, so then I'm giving the cue because I know he's familiar with it, and we've only done 2 things right now, sit and down. So it's 50-50, right? Well, I guess 33, include standing,
Yeah.
right? But there's only been 2 things that we put pressure on. Up with the sit, back of the neck down for the down position. So he's really only got 2 options there. So he's kind of computing like, do I stand down? Do I sit down? Neither of those worked. Still tapping, boom. Oh, it disappeared. So now he's starting to sync those things together. Does that make sense? So I like to make, once we've taught how to go into pressure, I like to make the dog think. Because me, myself, learn much better if I figure it out. Dogs are the same way, right? Now, yes, they need guidance because they don't know what we want, but that's why we did the stuff first with the hand and the leash pressure and everything, and a few reps of that before going to this, because I could see he had good concept, okay? So what we're doing with the sits and downs, or people call it puppy push-ups, to help them differentiate between the 2 different commands. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Have you going to cue sit?
Can I ask you a question?
Sit.
So with the old training class that we had, that was like a big thing that he wanted Mitch and I to do because he said it would get Milo's energy out. Do you, so like that is a thing that we've done a lot at home, is like up to, or sit to down to up, whatever, back and forth, you know what I'm trying to say. Do you think that that is having any bearing on like him right now, like trying to figure it out with Mitch, or do you think that he feels like these are 2 completely different things that he won't get confused about?
It definitely gives him familiarity.
Okay.
Because it's already been done. So like typically when I'm going to teach the down command, I'll tell the owner like, have you taught it before? And they'll say, yeah, with treats. And I'll say, revisit it this week. Because when we layer pressure over it, the down command is the one that most dogs have a problem with. So to make it easier, I'll tell them, practice during the week with food. So the dog is familiar with it, because dogs typically go to the last thing that they learn, or the last thing they practice the most is a reference point. So him having familiarity with it, I think is helping him with the motions, but now it's him thinking with the pressure as opposed to using a lure going up and down. Does that make sense? So I think it is helping, but he's still having to think, of course, in response to the remote.
But you don't think he's going to like expect a treat from this,
Oh, no.
right? Because that was like the problem we were having, right? Is then he would start like almost doing those, like moving from, if we put him in sit, then he would go to down and back up and then like bark for a treat.
Yeah, no, that's not gonna happen here.
Okay.
So, earlier when he was down in prematurely, it's kind of like what you're saying, that sequence, right? And that's why I was correcting, because I'm clarifying. You don't assume to lay down when we stop. You wait till I give you the pressure, right? So then he'll learn, okay, if I jump right to it, there's a consequence. As opposed to if I jump right to it, I get a treat.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if anything, it's gonna balance things out.
Okay.
And when it comes to food, like I'm not against food, I just don't rely on it to create reliable obedience.
Right.
You know, like I have like I think 3 clients right now that we're incorporating food with. 1 because it bites the owner. 2, the other 2 are because we're going more advanced with the training, and the dog was getting frustrated, and I needed to balance it out. And we used like sausage that we had, and the dog was doing much better. Because I was like, we're making them think at a much higher level that this particular dog needs a payout. Other dogs were able to process it without the payout. Does that make sense? So here, when you work with him, now I personally don't do these kinds of commands for long periods of time, like back to back. I do 3 to 5 minutes because it's redundant. When you practice things back to back to back to back, it gets frustrating with the dogs. So we're doing it for, obviously this is longer stuff to teach you, but at home, when you practice this, 3 to 5 minutes a piece. That's it, okay? And then we go to application, as always. So now we have the down command with pressure, which is an alternate to the place command. And you can use them alternatively, because place is easier. Go here, don't move. Sit, stand, lay down, I don't care, but don't move. Down is more strict. Lay down, don't get up from the down, right? So, if anything, if you've been doing really well with the place or whatever, I start leaning more towards the down, because if you can do that, which is more complicated, it's more strict, then that gets easier. Does that make sense? And then for like the sit, so the most useful commands are heel, recall, and place or down. Okay, because it's walk with me, don't pull, come to me when I call you, and don't move. Those tend to be like the 3 most used commands. Sit and stay are really not useful because they're so momentary. Unless like your dog's a big puller when they poop, now you have a formal sit to put them in that position while you pick up the poop, you know. But other than that, sit is pretty much taught as a default in my line of training, right? Because if you're in a heel, what does it do when you stop?
Yeah, auto sit.
The auto sits. And that tends to leak over to other things. So if you're ever walking with them and you just stop, a lot of times dogs should just default to a sit anyways when you're stationary, just from practicing it so much. So it kind of makes sit not that useful. But if you have a place where you can apply it, then I say definitely do so.
Okay.
You know, to start. So once we teach the commands, most people teach them and then hope they're useful in life. And I teach them and I still start using them in life so that they do become useful in life. You know,
Yes.
It's not going to be, oh, we taught it to you for these 15 minutes and in 2 months I might need you to do it. It's right away you have to start finding a place to apply it. So heel is easy because you walk them every day. Recall is easier because if he's at the park playing, you need to call him back. So you're actively using those things. Place command, go into home, most people don't practice it because they're at home. They don't really need their dog to do anything. Unless their dog's kind of like Milo and you want to apply more structure or be more strict or guests are coming over or something like that. But unless you're really going out, people don't do a whole lot of duration.
Yeah.
You know, but I always tell everybody, please do these things, use these things because it's kind of like if you don't use it, you lose it. The dog won't forget it, but then when you need it later on, it'll be sloppy because it's not been practiced.
Right,
Okay?
right. Yeah.
And in here, he's been sitting there for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and he hasn't laid down. Right? It's because now we're putting pressure behind it. So that's another thing I like to do is if you're going between the commands, is adding some space between them. Okay? Now it doesn't have to be this long because obviously I'm talking to you, so I can create a distraction. But if you're doing this yourself, if you do sit down, sit down, sit down, then get on that rhythm, and get on that pattern, and then we start seeing them doing that prematurely. Okay? So putting in gaps with different variances in time help him to think, I have to wait for your word before I go into the command. Okay? Questions on that? Let's try it down.
Okay. So, or just say down first.
Shoot it down first.
Okay, down.
Now, here, leash, tap, 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 tap. Now relax. Good. Yeah, boy. Okay, so he went like 5 minutes without any kind of cue. Then we kicked him down, right? And for whatever reason, he decides to get up. That's why we did that, okay? Because he's still learning the concept. We're still having to close that gap. Eventually, you'll switch from your commands, and it doesn't matter how much time is there, he'll just pop into the next one, okay? Questions on this?
Yes. On your Instagram, there was a comment, I feel like a while ago, and someone was talking about like an emergency down.
Yeah.
Is that like obviously after we get the regular down? How is that different? Or are you going to show us that later?
So, because you guys are doing 6, right?
Yeah.
This
so we
one,
have
5 or 6,
more.
yeah. So emergency down takes a bit more work.
Okay.
Now, it's easy to do, it just takes more work. Okay. So first, yes, we have to teach down first. That's what we've just done. The next thing we need is an instant down, meaning when you cue down, he doesn't do this, and then he taps, and then the leash to help him, we get down, boom. Okay, it's pretty quick succession. Once we get that speed down, boom, and it's consistent, then we can start pushing to downs in motion. Okay, which means like if I'm walking with him in a heel, I say down, boom, he can down like that. Okay, that's the next step.
Okay.
The step after that is he's bounding and running and playing, down, boom. Okay, that's what we end up developing the emergency down. Where it becomes applicable is, so this happened to Maggie. I think her story was, Ryder was chasing a squirrel. The squirrel hopped off a tree, and most squirrels would just hop onto the next tree. This squirrel did not. I think the squirrel decided to go to the street or something like that. But I think where he was positioned, had she recalled him, it was going to pull him into danger. So instead, she downed him. Does that make sense? So like I had a client, I only had one client know that they needed this. He was the one that, it was a client's dad. And I remember going to his place and he opens the door and he says, can you teach my dog to down no matter what he's doing? He's like, including playing. I go, yes. He's like, you're hired. I was like, all right, great. Shortest conversation ever. Because, when he had his place, they had a small street, and then the neighbor across the street had a golden doodle, and they would play with each other. And they would run back and forth across the street. And he says, if my dog's over at my neighbor's and they're running this way, I cannot call my dog if there's a car coming. He's like, I need to stop my dog over there. So I said, yeah, it's emergency down. So day one, we started teaching downs because I knew he needed it. So it's no matter what the dog is doing, running away, running towards you, whatever, down means stop where you are and drop. Okay? Where recall is not applicable. Okay? But it takes a couple of months to condition and train, because you have to get the down to be quick, and then you have to work them through all the stages. Okay. Now, if you want more advanced training, because what I'm doing here is prioritizing what you needed, and then we've gotten a lot of stuff done that we're teaching more. But you can always do another 6, and then you start pushing to other things. Okay?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Other questions? Let's go ahead and tell them break.
Okay. Break.
And we're going to move around with them. And you're going to pause for a second, get a little thought of it, and then you're going to just cue the down. Down. Tap, short leash, forward a little bit, tap, tap, and you're going to anchor yourself, tap, tap. Right, now wait there. Now, step on leash. Yep, and tap. There you go, right there. And go ahead and dip your number down. We're going to go down to 23. So, the last one and this one, he forge forward. So the next one that we do, I would assume he's going to forge forward. So instead, I'm going to keep my leash here, and I'm going to tap and see if I restrict his range of motion, if he'll go more into it. Okay, so I'll go ahead and pop him in a sit. Sit. Right, now wait a moment. And go ahead and shorten that leash. You're going to choke up, yeah, right there, perfect, okay? We're going to wait a moment. Yep. Wait a moment. Tap. Tap. Right, relax, wait a moment. Wait a moment. Tap. Tap. Right, wait a moment. Yeah, he's thinking through it, okay. Wait. Okay, now when you cue down, if he moves forward, you're just gonna anchor your hand. Okay? And you're gonna tap, and we're gonna see, just by limiting range of motion, if we'll start to feel him go down. Okay? Down. Down. Tap. Tap. Relax. Right there. See that? So here, using more so the remote and just limiting range. Because if I give him the slack and I start tapping, he's going to use all of this to try to get away from it. So by limiting range, because I know he's already familiar with it, and just tapping, he, again, 50-50. He's in the sit, so he's either going to stand or lay down. So I just keep that pressure on, and eventually he lays, and then I ease that leash up to give him the ability to do so. Okay? So when you work with him, if you see him keep breaking out of position and you're having to do more work to get him to down, I would jump to limiting the range of motion and tapping to see if he will figure it out just in response to the pressure, because that's ultimately what we're going to have, right? So the way this matures is if Milo's in a down and I'm over here and he starts to get up and I tap him, goes back into a down. Right now, if I tap him, then hop out of the down. Okay, so by limiting that range of motion, you're conditioning him that moving forward or around is not an option, just going into the position is. Okay? Go ahead and shorten leash again. And then cue the sit. Sit. Wait a moment. Good. Shh. Tap. And relax. Good. Tap. 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 Good. Relax. Good. And shorten just a little bit more. Perfect. Then cue it down. Down. No, right there. Good. So you see how he's moving around? That's him thinking. Okay. So in horse training, I heard this thing. It's called if they're blinking, they're thinking. So when they're trying to teach the horse something, that tells them whether or not they're trying to process. For dogs, it's similar, but they fidget. So the only thing to fidget is midget. So I can't do that. So with puppies, we see this a lot. When we're trying to make them think through things, you'll see them kind of like squirming around and kind of like getting up and stuff because they're thinking about what they need to do. Same concept here. I can always tell when I'm getting close to a dog's kind of breaking point with the pressure because they start to fidget and squirm a little bit. So then when I see that, I can start going up incrementally because if I keep going up in bigger jumps, I'm going to cause the dog to panic. Okay, so all of that is not bad. It's just him learning how to respond to the pressure. Does that make sense? So homework for this week is when practicing this command again, 3 to 5 minutes a piece. That's all you need.
Per day?
Per day.
Okay.
What we're trying to create is ease of response. Sit, boom, down, boom, sit, boom, down, boom, right? Pretty quick. Doesn't have to be perfect, but consistent, right? Once you feel like, hey, Milo, you're pretty good at this, we go to application. If I'm gonna watch TV again, right, same concept, instead of place, down. And I can step on the leash. So going with the leash, go a little slack, and with your left foot, perfect, right there. Because now if he tries to get up, you're gonna feel it right away. And you're already putting pressure on the neck, so he can't get far. I can just tap him, and ideally, he should just go back down into the pressure. Now, in the early stages, possibly, he gets up, and it's so short, he starts to panic a bit, that when you start to apply the pressure of the e-collar, you may need to use hand. If it looks like he's getting too frantic, ease up on the leash pressure, and go to limiting range of motion, okay, and work him through it. So if he panics, if we take off pressure or stop or try to reset, he's learning that panicking is an option, and instead I work him through it. So in case there's ever an emergency situation where he's scared to panic, I can still make him think as clearly as possible. Okay? So it's kind of like, I'm sure for people who like work in the ER, the first day is probably not very easy, right? Like a lot of franticness going on, but eventually you learn to think clear-headed in those kind of scenarios, right? Same thing for these guys. When he goes under stress and he starts to panic, people tend to want to lay off. So now like, do your best to guide them through it. That's why we use the leash in the beginning. That's why we're applying hand pressure. Because if he does panic, if I add a little bit of that hand pressure, it's kind of like his grip to reality of like, oh, I feel this. And I remember if I just did this, it would go away. And he tries it. Sure enough, everything disappears. He's like, oh, I didn't need to panic. That was the answer all along. And as we practice that more, he's able to think more clearly. Okay? So, down command, no limit to length of time, just like a place command. You would build it up same way. You start close, work a distance away. Yeah, other than that, I think that's it for that.
Can we make him down on objects?
Yes.
Okay.
But just remember, if you place Milo and then you down him, what command is he in?
Down.
Yes. So if you were to stand up, what would you do?
Well, he would get a tap for standing.
Correct. And what would we correct him in?
Down again.
Correct. Right. And if he sat up, we would correct him into a down again. The reason why I point that out is because sometimes people get confused. They place their dog and then they down them. And then they forget they're in a down. And then the dog gets up and they're thinking the dog's on place. But it's a down because your new command overrides your old command. Right? So if I place Milo and I say break, and he stays there, he's not on place anymore. He's free. He's just choosing to stay there. Right? So same thing, if I down him on place, it's no longer place command, it's down on which just happens to be place. Okay? So you can actually do that from the couch down, from an ottoman down.
He likes to stand on the couch, or like sit up on the couch, but I would like him to lay
Totally down, yeah. So, yeah, you can absolutely do that. But if you do place then down, it is a down command, not a place command. Okay? In the very beginning, if you're doing extended work with the down, having that leash on, of course, to limit range of motion and all that stuff, until we get consistency where he doesn't get frantic or panicked about anything, he just goes into the position. Okay?
Does physical touch work for putting him back and down if we don't have the e-collar on him?
Technically, yes. If you're a professional, if you want to try it, I don't have a problem with it. The only reason I'm saying you can do it is because that's how you're gonna learn. To be honest with you, right? So like earlier, I corrected with physical touch for getting off place. That I actually technically don't tell people to do that because they usually do it incorrectly. But I think for you guys and because of Milo, because of just his personality type, it would be beneficial for you just to learn other things. And it gives you a means, right? So if you did correct them from down, the way that would look, or from breaking them down, is if I had him here for example, and he popped up, I would give him a touch, a firm one, and then pressure on the back of the shoulders, and he should just go back into it. So then if I kept repeating that, eventually if I popped him, instead of getting up, he would just lay down. So it's kind of like a tap, but instead of a tap, it's the touch. Okay?
Is it always in this, like the inside?
I usually do belly area or soft area. So like right here, right? You can do here too. Just be mindful because of the ribs, you might catch your fingers, okay? But technically, here is okay.
Yeah.
And this is fine too.
Yeah.
And also side of neck, of course, we're gonna avoid that spot.
Yeah.
Now, if Milo lays down or sits with his legs up,
Mm-hmm.
I actually accept that. Because if that's him getting comfortable and he'll hold it for 2 hours, that's what I actually care
Go
about.
about that for 2 hours. He makes these weird Chewbacca noises when
He does, like as soon as he flips over.
For me, I don't need a pretty nice aesthetic looking down. I just need a down that's functional. So if he does this and will hold that for a long time,
Yeah.
that's what I care about.
Okay.
Okay? Other questions?
So there's something he's been doing recently. I think it's completely unrelated, but he's been licking the floors
Oh,
like
yeah.
aggressively. I don't know if it's because of like the salt that we're bringing in like on our shoes.
Maybe.
Well, we also saw Maddie had posted a video and was talking about that it's a sign of reflux in her dog, and I didn't know if that was like a universal sign.
If he's doing it habitually, then it might be the salt.
Yeah, because it
Or-
only happened recently. In
Yeah,
the last month or so.
right, and we
Okay.
haven't like changed his diet or like anything like that.
Yeah, because it's funny, because after I saw that with Maddie, Elizabeth with Luna, her dog one night was aggressively licking the floor and licking her chops, and I was like, I think she's got something caught in the throat. So we did
Oh.
peroxide and induced vomiting, and sure enough, she had coughed up a little cotton thing from a toy, and but she was doing the same thing, right? So what I would watch for is if he's doing it more frequently, I'm gonna assume it's either anxiety based or it's the salt, like you said. Otherwise, if you're like, yeah, he only did that one time, and you see it happen again, when he's licking, also be mindful he's licking his chops. Like you'll see it like just like kind of in the mouth, and that's most likely trying to induce vomiting. Okay, and then you know how to do peroxide.
No, but.
So
sounds-
if you Google it,
Yeah.
it'll say like 10 mLs of like peroxide to every pound or something like that, which that's not it.
Okay.
But you do that measurement. What I did for Luna, because I didn't think she was gonna eat anything, so we put it like in an empty beer bottle, and then I just stood over her and lifted her head up, and I poured it straight down her throat and just closed down on her mouth to force her to swallow, and then within like 3 to 5 minutes she puked it up.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if like he eats a
Okay.
leash or like something and he's like, you know he just ate something that he shouldn't have, within I think it's 15 minutes, you can induce vomiting with the peroxide and it should bring everything up.
Okay.
If it's been longer than that, I think you have to just rush him to the vet. But
Okay.
you can Google it and you'll give you that information there.
Okay.
Okay, but I've done it twice. One dog ate a leash and then Luna ate the cotton, and it worked both times.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead and break.
Break.
Excellent. Good job, guys.
Thank you.